All right, we should be good.
Good evening and welcome to another night at the round table. I am your host, Danny Ellison. Tonight, joined by my accustomed and esteemed panel, we've got Mr. Hank Sullivan, an esteemed political contributor in our conversations here, Mr. Derek Grayson, candidate for the United States Senate here in the state of Georgia, and Miss Josie Cruz, candidate for the United States Congress in Georgia's 4th District. Tonight, we have a special invite and a special guest that will be joining us potentially if all of the media things work out. We're hoping that we'll have Brian Slawinski on, also a Republican candidate for the United States Senate. Today is July 29th, and our time has changed, as you've noticed, to 7 p.m. Our airing will now change permanently going forward from 7 to 8 p.m. So join us on a better hot spot right after dinner hour, right before the cocktails. And we look forward to seeing you on the weeks ahead. Tonight's conversation, we are talking about RINOs, CINOs, and those that have hijacked what we believe to be our political titles. So far, we know that RINOs means Republicans in name only. Well, tonight I introduce you to the thought of difference. What is a CINO? Conservatives in name only. Is there such a thing? We also want to talk about the model and presence of new politics, or is it actually new? But what is it titled? It's called exposure politics, where the politics of our nation, embedded and underground, become exposed by those that are willing to run on the Constitution, for the Constitution, by the Constitution. They're running for you. Derek, I'm coming to you first tonight now that we've launched the show, and I want to talk for a minute just about the basis of a Republican in name only. It's something that you use often, and it's a term that you understand. But what is your reasoning for using such terminology?
Okay. I was not clued in to Republicans in name only when I first began in 2014, my first run for U.S. Senate. And the establishment welcomed me with open arms. They couldn't have been kinder. The grassroots, they loved me. Never an issue. And I like to make the point that I do not believe that the Republican Party is racist at all. What I did find, and it was shocking, as I learned about the Constitution and how the ins and outs and how people vote, et cetera, I began to see a pattern. And when it finally emerged, I realized that there was a duopoly. And when I started talking about why are certain of Republicans voting a certain way when they should be voting with the Constitution, I realized that that was by design. And when I started to bring that to the forefront, the attitude towards me began to change. I became somewhat of an outcast. However, before becoming that outcast, I remember at one of the debates, the very first debate that I was in, they did an online poll as to who won that debate, and I won that debate. A couple of debates later, I met with I got a phone call from John Padgett, who called me into his office to meet with him, and I went. And now I've already been accused of telling a lie about this, but I would not make such a statement if it were not so. A lady by the name of Debbie Dooley has accused me of lying. But I went to that office, and he basically said, Derek, why don't you drop out of this race, and we will come up with some money to help you run against Hank Johnson. And I said, how much money? And the number was $20,000. And I told him $20,000 is not going to do anything to win that congressional seat. And his response was, well, Derek, I didn't say that's all I was going to raise for you. So we had a few more words, and I finally told him, I said, look, I'm going to lose the bigger race. I'm not going to sell out. This is the race that I need to be in. I am well aware of the deal that they have. We got 4 Democrat districts. For the most part, they don't tend to mess with them. And the Democrats don't tend to mess with the other 10. gives the people the illusion that they are being represented when they are not. Um, I talked about this Saturday when I spoke. Doug Collins and David Perdue, they are all in the 57 to 59% range. And when people say, well, you can't really trust that particular site, the New American, well, then I guess they are lying when they say that Rand Paul and Thomas Massey are at 94 and 99%. And there are others that are that high. My point is, if Rand Paul and Thomas Massey and others can vote with the Constitution the majority of the time, why can't these Republicans here in Georgia? Not a single one exceeds 70%, and that 70% is Jody Heiss. But the rest are abysmal. Karen Handel is 49%. And it gives you the votes if you go to the site, and it tells you why the vote was contrary to the Constitution. On top of that, today, the Georgia Recorder came out with their scathing analysis of David Perdue and Doug Collins, saying Doug Collins, based on his vote, is ranked second, the second most liberal Republican in the state of Georgia. There's something, so if people are seeing this, there's something to be said. And understand this. When people have asked me, well, Derek, why have you never been on Fox? Because I'm going to tell them about RINOs. Well, Derek, why have you never been invited to the White House? And it's not Trump's doing. He doesn't control that. But the establishment is not going to invite me because I'm going to talk about RINOs. I am going to tell people there's an illusion. And when the parties are almost evenly split and the country is constantly going down in the toilet, that means somebody else is helping the other. And that's the RINOs helping the liberal Democrats. And then I'll close with this. Tucker Carlson, who I don't think goes far enough, but he did do this. He called out Trey Gowdy, Ryan, Paul Ryan, Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham, said that in that first year, they had the ability to shut down the phony investigation, but they chose not to. They chose not to. But that's as far as he went, because I don't believe Fox would let him go any further. And today I heard that Rush Limbaugh was lambasting Republicans for allowing it as well, and some even encouraging it. I stopped listening to those guys, Rush, Hannity, Beck, because they never talk about that. And the Black people who are the darlings of the Republican Party being invited to these places, if you listen to what they talk about, they only blame liberal Democrats. We didn't get here if liberal Democrats did not have help. There was not much difference in Obama and Bush, with the exception of Obama opening the floodgates for sexual deviancy. When Trump was elected, we had the House and the Senate. They could have done something, or at least made an effort to fund the wall. They could have made an effort to defund Obamacare. They could have made an effort to do a number of things when they had the majority, but they chose not to. And instead, 45 plus Republicans left their seats. That included Ryan and Trey Gowdy. This is a problem, and it is disturbing to me that people do not understand it. That is why we are in the shape that we are in. You don't hear any of these Republicans lamenting what is happening to this country as it relates to masking, social distancing, people losing their businesses. Instead, they're more on the boat. And again, because it is the government's responsibility, because they shut them down, they want to push more aid. And when you have people that make more money sitting at home, why the heck would they go back to work? So I'm going to shut up with that.
Well, Derek, that's an interesting intro. And I think that you hit a lot of the topics that we're going to discuss tonight. Folks, while you're in here tuning in, just to give you a revamp of where we're at tonight, we're talking about RINOs, Republicans in name only. We're talking about CINOs, conservatives in name only. And we're talking about platforms running all across the United States, but are being premiered through example by Miss Josie Cruz and Mr. Derek Grayson, political platforms that are running on the exposure politics ideology, exposing the truth while trying to hold their values to the Constitution and to you. Tonight, I want to give a special welcome to Mr. Brian Slawinski, also a candidate for the United States Senate here in the state of Georgia. Brian, I'm going to come to you here in just a minute. If you'll hold tight, Hank, I need to bring you in for a minute on your forward here. I know that your time with us is limited this evening, but Hank, obviously, you know the conversation, you know where we're at. We spoke earlier, and I want to give you a total of 7 minutes, Hank. If you'll just jump in here, give us your 2 cents and educate those of us that might be in the group of sheeple. You got to unmute for me, Hank.
Sorry about that.
There you go. Come on in.
This politics thing for a good long while. And, you know, if you think about, say, Jimmy Carter was more conservative than most Republicans are today. I mean, if you actually go back and look at his policies and look at the spending habits, fiscal responsibility, and those kinds of things that are normally judged into conservative versus liberal, Jimmy Carter was, by today's standards, more conservative than just about any kind of Republican you're going to find in our government, meaning the Congress. We will exclude Trump because this is a special case. But what I've noticed is that as the debt necessarily increases, then the overall attitudes of our Congress gravitates more and more liberal. And there's a reason for that, because of the way that our national debt is set up and the way our monetary system is set up. The system has got to keep growing or it dies. It's a Ponzi scheme. That's the way it's always been. So in order to keep the dollars flowing into the economy, the largest single contributor to liquidity in the economy is the federal government. And that necessarily means that if the federal government doesn't keep spending more and more and more each year, then the dollars that are actually circulating in the economy tend to dry up. It's like it doesn't rain in Lake Lanier. That means that you keep letting water out of the dam, then the amount of water in the lake is going to go down. Well, the same kind of situation happens with our economy. And so what we have is a necessary situation, a necessary program of increased government expenditures, which necessarily means that government must grow, which creates the illusion that the reason why government grows is because you have more and more liberal attitudes of wanting to take on more and more projects in the government. But what it really is this program of having to create more and more debt in order to fund more and more of our economy, because the economy is being sucked dry by this wealth transfer system that is our private banking system that runs the government. So over time, you have a government that back in the 1960s and 50s, 40s, whatever time you want to consider, the government was very, very conservative back then. Even under Lyndon Johnson, the government was conservative based upon how you would register it today, and the amount of the national the size of the economy versus the size of the government. Then you would find that even back during the 1960s in Lyndon Johnson, that he was a much more conservative president than what we would have today. But it is all driven by the need to keep the system going. And the more and more the longer the system runs, the more the government has got to spend. Right now, they're printing money out of the air to keep the system going. And that's what's driving this. But that translates into this concept that what we have here are Republicans in name only because they're not acting like Republicans. Well, they're not, because they're driven by this need to keep the system going, which is driven by the need of the corporations to be able to keep the economy going, which also is driven by the corporations needing to own and control the government. So they're not working for the American people. They're working for this system that is in place, that is run by the corporations and the financial corporations that are operating our monetary system. So I know that's a different kind of perspective than you might have been imagining receiving, but this is not a static situation. This is a dynamic situation, and it continually gets worse and worse and worse, because if it doesn't, then the entire system crashes.
So correct me if I'm wrong, Hank. What I heard you just say is that we're suffering from systemic economic political control.
Well, yeah, it is the system. Yes, it's the system. And it's the systematic impoverishing of the American people, because the American people have to fund all of this additional debt that is then transferred to the people who set the system up and operate the system for themselves and not for the good of the people. Well, when they own and control the government because they have the money to be able to fund campaigns, then it appears as though that these politicians are becoming more and more progressive, less conservative, and look like they're rhinos, but what they're really doing is just pleasing a different master than the American people. The people want what they want. The corporations have the means to keep our politicians in office, and so the politicians are not going to do what the people want. That politicians are going to do what the corporations want, because that's how they keep their jobs.
So, wow. So folks joining in and watching us now, what we've learned thus far this evening in our conversation, Mr. Grayson and Mr. Sullivan have both addressed different spectrums, different angles of what a Republican in name only is. Josie, if you'll just stand by and get ready, I'm going to come to you more about the conservative in name only, because that's something that you're familiar with, as people hijacking the word conservative. But right now, I want to introduce Mr. Brian Slowinski to all of our viewers tonight. He's joining us. Thank you, Brian, for finding it in your schedule to be able to join us on our Zoom calls, our little meetings that we do here instead of in studio, obviously respecting the COVID situation. Mrs. Slowinski is a candidate for the United States Senate here in the state of Georgia, running in the same race as Mr. Derek Grayson. So, Brian, I want to give you a moment to introduce yourself and chime in on the conversation.
Well, thank you very much for the kind introduction. And I know Mr. Grayson quite well, and we've been having these online debates with the Senate candidates, and they've been very interesting. We've been able to have at least one Republican, one Democrat, one independent. I am actually the Libertarian endorsed candidate, as well as I've been endorsed by or recommended by the Constitution Party here in Georgia. So I'm actually running as a unity candidate, someone who can be the really good choice to the lesser of two evils. But again, my name is Brian Slowinski. I'm married, the father of 8 children, and a few dogs you hear in the background. But I'm also someone who knows really well what a rhino is. And a little background on me is I actually moved to Georgia in 2004 from Minnesota. My wife took a job at the Medical College of Georgia. I had already retired. I helped develop online shopping for grocery stores. So anybody that's utilizing that now during the COVID-19 thing, it's really good for people to not expose themselves that way. But I moved here in 2004, got involved in Republican politics, got involved on the precinct level. I was a precinct chairman. I got involved on the county level. I was actually the county chairman over in Columbia County for the Republican Party. I actually was the district treasurer in the 12th Congressional District, as well as a state committeeman in the 10th Congressional District, as well as as well as the 12th Congressional District. I was also on the nominations committee for the state committee. I was put on that. And I come to find out, basically in 2015, I came on board with President Trump. I was an early supporter of President Trump in 2015, very vocal. I worked his events, helped set up the local office for him in Augusta, was one of his top phone callers in the state of Georgia as well as nationwide when he was running the primary. Well, after President Trump won the Georgia primary, we had the county conventions. Well, I'd taken my son, Scotty, who was 18 at the time, to be able to go to his first county convention. Well, basically they had their slate, even though I was someone who had every time I went to a convention, I went to every county convention, I went to every district convention, I went to every state convention since 2004, representing Columbia County. But instead, what they did is they purposely left myself and my son and anybody that was not willing to basically be one of their yes men off the list. That included people who were minorities at the time, Black, youth. They were all left out. There's no way you could challenge the slate. They literally just rammed the slate through and said, "That's tough." Well, I just think that's really wrong. So, but
Well, so Brian, if I can intersect for a minute,
sure.
it sounds to me like what you're saying is something that is familiar to me. It's familiar to Josie. I'm a former candidate for the United States Congress. It's very familiar to Derek. All of us that have come into the political realm believing in the conservative and Republican values, we have been chastised and met with resistance from the party in which we endear and that we love. And it sounds to me like you're saying you've experienced the same thing, which, if I'm not mistaken, led to you getting onto the libertarian side of things. Is that correct?
That's correct. I mean, that's the reason why I moved to the Libertarian Party, because I was no longer welcome in a party that I helped to promote.
So can I challenge that way of thought?
Sure.
Just for a second. I mean, we're talking about Republicans in name only. My question to you is, how do true Republicans and conservatives learn to rely on true Republicans that are not rhinos, that are not conservative in name only, if the party is abandoned by the true Republicans?
Well, I get what you're meaning, but you got to look at other alternatives too. One of the things that I did when I set up these debates was I invited all candidates and all views. Everybody's invited. I send out. There's going to be like 10 more online debates. We're getting more in depth on subjects. We're spending an actual hour on one subject or two subjects and talking for an hour, and each candidate gets 5 minutes to actually talk about it, not just a 30-second soundbite, because you can't get it out of that. Most of the candidates you see that are the $1 million candidates can't talk past 30 seconds or a minute on a subject because they don't know that much about the subject. They're just basically doing talking points. And if they actually had to talk for another 5 minutes on the subject, they couldn't talk on it. Great example is I don't know if you're familiar with the show called The West Wing. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
They had an episode where President Bartlett at the time was talking to his Republican nominee at the time, and he literally pulled that on him. He said, "You want to know something? I will quit this race if you can actually tell me where you stand on education for more than a minute." And the other candidate couldn't do it because most of them are trained just to give their stump speech, their 30-second or their minute response, and they couldn't talk policy if they tried to. And that's the problem. Is we need to talk more policy, more how we're going to change things for the better, and get back to the Constitution, get back to the enumerated powers, Article 1, Section 8. If we can do that, if we can actually get more people involved in that, I think we can actually have a true alternative when it comes to voting on November 3rd.
The fact that you reference Article 1, Section 8 is already impressive because most history and constitutional scholars don't actually jump into the Constitution. So, Brian, we thank you for that, and I'd ask that you would continue to be in the conversation.
Sure.
Leading forward, folks, I'm going to bring Josie Cruz into the table, but what I'd like to encourage all of our panelists to do tonight, feel free to raise your hand, jump in, and interact with each other. I want you to be able to cross-reference, and if you feel like there's a point that's brought up that you want to jump in on, let's do it. Let's have a conversation. Josie, out of all this conversation and the information that you've heard thus far, welcome to the roundtable. Good evening to you. It's good to see you, and the table's yours.
Thank you. Thank you for having me tonight again. It's nice meeting you, Mr. Slawiski. Hi, guys. Well, when we talk about these rhinos, Republican in name only, it's just, I just can compare for what I went through back in Venezuela, and I'm seeing the same behavior here. And it's sad because as America being a developed country, I was not prepared to find out this kind of behavior that I'm seeing. But since my candidacy for district number 4 has to be on its way, I have to keep on campaigning. I'm gonna be talking about the issues. I'm gonna be doing what I have to do. I don't have no support as yet. Thank you, Derek, for giving me the platform to communicate with everybody so the message can get out there, and giving the people, the citizen of Georgia Congressional 4 District, a better option, the one that they have today. So Derek was talking about how this situation came into our country, and I don't see our leaders in Congress like correcting a basic concept of that we are not a democracy, we are a republic. For example, I don't see nobody correcting somebody across the aisle, hey, we are not a democracy, we're a republic. So basically, going back to basic, going back to the Constitution, upholding the Constitution, but when you see those voting records, less than what, 60, 40? Then you ask yourself, wait a minute, what kind of people are we electing for this position when they're supposed to represent our people for the best, looking for the best, the prosperity, the healing, and the good for each district, and then we end up finding out, boom, oh, 46% this person, oh, 60% that person. Damn, like, it's like, no, you gotta be kidding me. So the citizens are being lied to vote for some people, some candidates who are not upholding the Constitution, and they already are in those positions of power. So what I advise the citizens who are listening to this round table is, do your research, do your homework. Do not listen to others telling you vote for this one or vote for that one. Do your part, because we are in moments in history in this country that we can lose our country for the big system that we were discussing for the last month. And we still have a chance to recover America from the communist system. We see the system symptoms going on. And after, yes, go ahead, Hank.
Josie, I know this is a completely different subject, but I've been dying to ask this question. Do you mind if I interrupt and ask a question?
Go ahead.
Okay. What is it like to be running against a guy who thinks that Guam is floating on the Pacific Ocean and that will tip over if you put too much weight on one side of it? What is it like to run against someone who thinks that that's the truth?
Well, as coming from a communist country in a process, well, it was in a process of socialism, but now today is a communist country. But the process, the progressive way of socialism taking a country is the communist strategy implementation is this. I just wanted to show you guys so you understand what he's doing. He's not stupid and he's not ignorant. What he's doing, he's using the strategy of distraction right here. Distraction. For example, one, okay, the distraction. Everybody's talking about he and his stupid comment about one flipping over, but nobody's putting attention on what he's doing underneath, which are the 6 bills that he already implemented in the floor, in the House floor, about controlling the Second Amendment. So that is a strategy. For example, Hugo Chavez used to do that a lot. Evo Morales used to do it a lot. Fidel Castro used to do it a lot. So people get distracted with the stupid things. You know how they call Nicolás Maduro in Venezuela? They call him the donkey. Donkey because donkey, the burro in Venezuela means a person who's not intelligent. Okay, but who is still in power? Who's still changing constitution? Who's still making changes, controlling Venezuelans' life? And they still calling him burro because sometimes he say, "Oh, I talked to the little bird. Oh, that little bird."
Josie, I'm going to have to ask you to make sure you make a post with the spelling of that title so that all of us can actually participate in the proper pronunciation of that word as it applies to people in our Senate and in our Congress. Real quick, folks, I've got to shift over. Mr. Alex Johnson, one of our esteemed panelists, a legal attorney representing in the Atlanta greater area and defending all of us all without us even knowing. That's his intro every time. Alex, tonight we're talking about RINOs, Republicans in name only. We're talking about CINOs, conservatives in name only. And we're talking about exposure politics, the process in which true conservative, true Republican candidates are running to expose the political nature of how politics works. Alex, we welcome you to the show. The table is yours.
Well, thanks, Danny, and I appreciate this. I'm sorry I missed last week, but glad to be here tonight with such a great panel. One thing about RINOs, and I've for years been arguing about RINOs and trying to call them out. A lot of Republicans don't like the term RINO. They think it breaks apart the party, that it makes it so that we lose elections. And I think that doesn't make any sense. I mean, RINOs are the reason we lose elections, because when you ruin your brand and you have no credibility, that's how you lose voters. You get people who leave for good reason. And that's actually Brian's comments earlier made me realize like my history of why like RINOs are so terrible, because I had a similar experience to him. In 2009 is when I first got involved in politics. I remember, I was involved in politics before the first time I got involved in the party, in the GOP and the local county level. And I remember going to GOP meetings in DeKalb County, and I remember thinking we weren't really doing a whole lot. I mean, we'd listen to politicians come and speak and say how they voted for something and it was good for us, and everybody would applaud. And I remember being the odd guy out, wondering what's going on. But I figured that, hey, this must be meaningful. This may be helpful. And for years, we talked about getting new people involved, getting young people involved. I mean, I think I was early 20s when I was there, like 24, 25. And it was weird because I was by far the youngest person going to the meetings. And it was interesting because they wanted new people all the time. Then in 2012, a whole bunch of new people showed up, young people, fiscal conservatives. Most of them were pro-life, like clearly not rhinos. They were very young, they're wanting to get involved, and they're mostly there wanting to support Ron Paul. That's why they were coming out, but they were very friendly, wanting to be involved. And everything sort of just seemed to me going smoothly. At the time, I was legal counsel for the party. I was saying, great, we have new people who are going to be involved. We go to the county convention. The new people outnumber the older group, which is, to me, is awesome. It's, you know, an answer to the prayers. And Derek, I know, is smiling a little bit because he remembers this happening, because I was told by the county chairman saying, hey, invite everyone to the next GOP meeting, the next county meeting. And I'm like, well, great, this is awesome. And we invite them. And I personally invite them, and then our county leadership proceeds to stand up and talk about how all the new people were essentially backstabbing, disrespectful, just terrible people that shouldn't have been involved at all. And I remember sitting there thinking, what's happening? I've been supporting these people for years. I don't see why they're going back on their word. And Derek got up after, and he listened to them rant. And then, you know, and I don't know if he was there when I got up almost immediately, because the chairman said, hey, anybody in the committee want to talk, go ahead and say something. And I got up and said essentially what I'm saying now. But Derek got up and called them out for essentially being rhinos. They got up and walked out of the room. It was for good reason. I mean, they were very disrespectful to the new people. But what I realized at that time, and as I stayed involved wanting to fix it as the years went on, was that there's two different groups in the party. There are those there that really want to see positive change, and then there are those there that get paid for being there. And they don't get paid for being involved in the party because, you know, showing up to meetings, you don't get paid for that. Being in party leadership, you don't get paid. But it's the political industry, it's the lobbyists, it's the political consultants who work for candidates. Because you just have to ask yourself, why would they want the party to actually call out the candidates and the politicians who aren't standing for Republican principles, who aren't for pro-life or pro-gun, who aren't there for less taxes and smaller, less intrusive government? Like, you don't want a party that is doing that if you're a lobbyist or a political consultant. You want to be able to write whatever.
Alex, and I hate to jump in, but tonight's show, we're cut down to an hour, but I want to come back to something that you just said. You just said that party leadership doesn't get paid. And being a part of the meetings, they don't get paid. But it is directly their affiliation and access to lobbyists and the corporate sector, which therefore 9 times out of 10, I would suggest and assume, just based on common sense here, that actually makes them conservative in name only or Republican in name only, because they have listed themselves as an item for sale. Whereas those of us that are real Republicans and real conservatives have stated that we are not for sale. Is that a fair statement, Alex?
Oh, that's absolutely fair, because what's going on is that they're mercenaries, but because they're paid for it and they're so involved, because again, they're making their connections from it. They're usually very good at seeming friendly, charming, charismatic. They're very good at seeing like, that's the guy that I want to have a beer with. That's the person who I'd want in leadership. And that's how they come across. So, I mean, for about I think it was 4 years, might have been 2, we actually had a lobbyist that was party chairman of the state GOP. I had run against him. I had lost, but all the delegates knew he was a lobbyist, and you know, a slim majority voted for him anyway. And it was, and then he ended up not bringing the money, and the party ended up being in a deep hole that the current chairman's pulling us out of. But that's what we had, and it's I mean, that's the thing. Their career is being friends with the politicians. So, I mean, what accountability is there if the party's not providing it? I mean, that's honestly where I moved in to create the Georgia, well, not create, but help re-strengthen the Georgia Republican Assembly, which now has helped get better leadership into the party. And we've endorsed some great candidates recently, including like Matt Gertler in 9 and Marjorie Green in 14. But people like Matt are the ones who have made the votes and then been hated by leadership for it, by people like David Ralston and Nathan Deal. So
Wow, those are
that's how we
some
fix it.
powerful names that you're bringing up, Alex, and I hate to step on you, but here I come. You know, I gotta stay in my timelines, folks. What we've been talking about is Republicans in name only, conservatives in name only, exposure politics, the elitist left, and the fact that they actually control most people that have hijacked your title. They took the word Republican from you. They took the word conservative from you. They've hijacked you. They are actually for sale, and they've sold themselves out to lobbyists. And they've told you to your face that they represent you. Panelists, what we're going to do now, we're going to take 2 minutes apiece. We're going to do a roundhouse here where you get to attack this topic and do your closeout. 1 hour tonight on the show. And tonight's topic has been amazing. Brian Slawinski, I want to give you the floor first as our guest panelist. If you would, you have 2 minutes, sir.
RINOs. They run over all the real Republicans and the real conservatives out there. And they've been running roughshod for many, many years. It's time to get them out. The only way to do that is we got to start voting for people who are not part of that process, that are not supporting that process. Because right now, if you go in there and utilize that, what happens is that they keep collecting your money. Instead, I would suggest that you look at each individual candidate, where they stand on all the issues, and try to vote for people who stand for the Constitution, who understand what Article 1, Section 8 is, who understand the enumerated powers and how they are supposed to be a check on our federal government, and everything else goes back to the 10th Amendment, back to the states and to the people and to we the people. I ran for Congress in 2014 as a Republican, a Tea Party conservative. But the decision was already made. It was already down to already 2 people before it even started. So get out there and vote. Get out there and support the candidate of your choice, no matter what party it is. Try to get somebody who actually understands what the Constitution of the United States is. Because if we can do that, we can start making real choices. And please look at my site at www.voteslawinski.com. Every Monday night, we're starting up again. We're taking a week off this next week, but we start back up August 10th. Every Monday night from 7 till 9, we're having all the United States Senate candidates are invited. Doesn't mean they all show up, but the ones that show up are actually the ones that are actually people who actually care about what's going on, and they're not going to give you a 30-second soundbite or a minute soundbite or anything like that. Come and learn about the issues, where we stand, and learn from each other, and get out and support the candidate of your choice. Thank you.
Brian, I want to thank you, brother, for joining on with us, coming in, being transparent, honest, and open to the conversation at the round table. I, as your host, am humbled, and I would hope that you'll come back and attend with me another time. Catherine Bernard is in with us, and Catherine, it's been a little bit of a conversation here, and I saw you had to get online a little bit on the back end, but I want to give you a minute to catch up on what we were talking about, Catherine. And again, as a recap, we were talking about conservatives in name only, Republicans in name only, and the fact that we need to be operating in a system of exposure politics, like the candidates and political contributors that we have on the show tonight. Catherine, I can give you 4 minutes if you want to jump in and contribute. Catherine, are you there? Your screen shows.
Hey, Danny. I'm
There
here.
you
Sorry
go.
about that. Still out in the country, hanging out with my wonderful little nephew who's been listening to the conversation up until now. He's had lots of very interesting questions. But wow, all this party politics, Brian Slawinski, one of my first political pals from all the way back in the 12th district, when I first got started in 2012, and then hearing about Alex's travails and the story of the lobbyists. The Republican Party has a lot going on, and it's certainly wonderful that we still have great candidates like Derek Grayson in it. But I will say, party politics does seem to drag down principle a lot of the time, because party politics, as noble as the aims of the Republican Party were when it was started in 1854 to, oppose the Fugitive Slave Act, we have really come a long way since then. Now we have a lot of Republicans calling for more federal involvement, more federal control. And so that's, I think, the observation that I really have is party politics are a bit of a relic of the time when people didn't have the ability to independently find out what was going on with the candidate. They didn't have the ability to message that candidate directly and hear what they had to say. They had to rely on what the party was telling them. And now that's just not the case anymore. And so we have to look at, are the parties actually helping us, or are they making it harder for us to pursue our principles? And I think with the stories that we've already heard tonight, there's a lot of examples where they're actually making it harder.
I would agree with that. Catherine, what an insight. And thank you so much for jumping in. Hopefully next Wednesday, we'll be able to get some more action and some more time with you. And next, let's go back to Mr. Alex Johnson.
Oh, well, yeah, I think that ultimately the parties have ended up being very, I mean, they've become more and more destructive over recent years. I think that ultimately they do have a purpose, and that's getting more people involved and knowing what's going on. But a lot of times who you're elected into leadership there really drives the narrative. And that's why we need to get more people involved and actually have a clear decision on who good Republicans are, the ones who are actually standing for principle. I mean, for example, we endorsed just last week through a convention, Matt Gertler. Our members did that. They endorsed Matt Gertler for the 9th district. And has a history of going and voting against more spending in the Georgia budget, pushing for gun rights, pushing against cronyist tax breaks for various groups. And the sad thing is, if you only listen to the media, you would think he's terrible. I mean, you have Nathan Deal and David Ralston, who habitually were going to the media talking about how he's terrible, implying that he doesn't like police, how he doesn't like the law, that he wants to turn around and just, hurt people. Like, it's a very odd thing to hear those type of lies and rumors being pushed through media, but that's what goes on with the current type of party and political leadership that doesn't stand up for truth. And luckily now we have elected better leadership in the Georgia GOP due to a lot of the work in the GRA and the Georgia Republican Assembly. But it's up to all of us to stand for truth. Otherwise, rhinos win.
What a catch right there. Alex, you should probably get that printed on a shirt. Well played, sir. If not, in any other way, rhinos win. Hank Sullivan, coming to you real quick for your closeout, brother.
I'll put it in a nutshell, the way I see it. Money and those who have it control both parties. The art of politics within that framework is to maintain office by the use of campaign rhetoric during election seasons to overcome voting records dedicated to representing private interests rather than the voters during terms of office. That's it.
Okay. Well, if you had a mic, I'd ask you to drop it, but that would imply that you drop your computer. I prefer that you not. However, simple, straight to the point. Enough said. Josie Cruz, take us home.
Ready? So I have to write it down, what I'm going to say. This is how I feel. I am witnessing right now Venezuela, but in English. Just the language change. I see the same behavior, a socialist country becoming a communist country, and Venezuela is lost forever. Are we going to allow our beautiful country, USA, be in the same position of Venezuela? That's my question now. Thank you.
Josie, I want to thank you for your transparency, your willingness to stand for our country and our principles, and your willingness to speak out against tyranny and that which tries to mask itself behind the names of righteousness and justice. Derek, I'm going to come to you. And with this, Derek, I'm going to ask you to take a little bit of extra time. And I want you to close this out for me, okay? Hardcore. Come on, because this was your topic.
Yes.
So everybody on this panel is near and dear to my heart. I remember I was going to, when I was running, I was supporting some type of bill, and Hank Sullivan and Mike Scupine pulled me to the side and talked to me and showed me the ins and out of constitutionality of this particular bill. And when I left there that night, a changed person for the better, I said, I owe it to those I would ask to vote for me to understand as much about the Constitution as I can, even if they don't, but to always be in a position to be able to explain the why. Now, that's a lesson that Hank and Mike Scupine gave me, years ago. Then Alex Johnson and Catherine Bernard. I mean, I was down in the trenches with those guys. I wasn't really that political guy, but I fought for Alex. I don't think nobody was as upset as I was at how that lobbyists came in, and those short-sighted individuals could have had a winner, but they chose the loser for us, but the winner for them. Catherine Bernard, I've seen her fight for those, and it helped me to get the understanding is why everybody was bringing up George Floyd's background, that he was high then, et cetera, et cetera. It was people like Catherine Bernard that helped me to understand the importance of the Bill of Rights and to see things a lot clearer. So over the last 10 years, I've had a lot of teachers in people that have become my very close friends. Brian Slawinski supported me when I was running, brought me down to speak at one of his meetings, treated me with love, which is one of the reasons why he is here tonight. I had wanted him on earlier, even though we don't agree on everything. I know Brian wants what's best for this country and for his constituency, should he win this Senate race. So even if I don't win, I just want somebody good to get in. So it's a selfless endeavor for me. And Scott has been with me 2 elections, not getting paid. My other team members, Lisa and Geraldine and John, John will drive 200 miles for me just to make sure somebody is there with me. And the same with Jim and the passion, that Josie is putting forth. And Danny, you're stepping up and doing what you're doing. So I am blessed and fortunate to know people who have not only influenced me. Yes, I don't know everything and I learn from other people. But I see their passion, and I would do them a disservice if I didn't take what they took the time to give me and pay it forward to others. And that's why I do what I do. I have never used the words leader in any speech, because it is the leadership that is creating our problem as it is. We need people that are willing to serve. And that's where we get lost, Danny. Nobody is willing to serve for their fellow man. And my final statement, a quote that I made earlier, racism, which is what the Republican Party has been accused of for many years. And every time I hear somebody say it, I realize how ignorant, painfully ignorant that person is in understanding the history. In my video today, I asked, is Donald Trump a racist or is it the Republican Party? Well, I said, unequivocally that Donald Trump is not a racist, and neither is the Republican Party. Else, I would not have been embraced by Scott and Catherine and Brian and Alex and one guy who has been very generous to our campaign, Nathan Porter. I hope you don't get mad for me putting it out there, but these are people I know that believe in this country. However, those that are truly racist, racism steals the heart of the individual. That's what racism does. Racism will always be with us. It's never going anywhere. And racism is not the problem in this country. The problem is rhinoism is stealing the soul of America. I yield, Danny. Thank you.
Hey, man, thank you, Derek, for your closing statements. And you remind me of a song, and all I can think of is the opening lyrics. What's love got to do with it? Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we have gone around the roundtable. We have joined all of our panelists. We've toured. We've had a new roundtable panelist with us, Mr. Brian Slawinski, also a candidate for the United States Senate. Obviously, Miss Josie Cruz from Georgia's 4th Congressional District, Mr. Alec Johnson, and Miss Catherine Bernard, our legal analyst and panelist here on the show, and Mr. Hank Sullivan, the one that keeps us all straight. Mr. Derek Grayson, everybody, another candidate for the United States Senate, and my brother, and obviously the producer of the show. Tonight, we talked about our conservative values being hijacked by conservative in name only politicians. We talked about Republicans in name only, or as you're used to hearing about it, rhinos. We have talked about the hijacking of our political system, the names and titles that we hold dear and our own values being taken from us. May I remind you that it was in 1998 here in the state of Georgia, just merely 22 years ago, that we had our first Republican governor since way back when. The Republican values have been restored to our people here in Georgia. In such a short amount of time, 22 years, we've been underscored, hijacked, taken from, lied to, and buried. Our voice is silent. But tonight, ladies and gentlemen, look at this panelist. Look at before you. Look at everybody on this show. We refuse to be silent ourselves. And based on our knowledge, our learning, our experience, and our convictions, we pledge to you that we know what love's got to do with it. We're here for you. We will be your voice. Mr. Grayson, I see your hand.
There's always that person that's in the background that does things for you, that's always got your back. And I was remiss. I need to give her an honorable mention because, she has carried me a very, very long way. And that is Miss Yvonne Forbes, staunch supporter of the Grayson campaign. And she also believes in me and what I am doing. So I just wanted to say that she's a friend of the campaign, and many of you know her and have met her, and she deserves an honorable mention as well. Thank you.
Mr. Grayson, I thank you for that acknowledgement and your humility being exchanged to all of us that are here in the panelists that back the Constitution, back each other, and we back our people. Folks, tonight has been great. It's been a wonderful conversation. Keep in mind that on our future shows, starting next Wednesday, we're going to be on air at 7, leaving at 8 o'clock. We've cut that 30 minutes out just so you have a little bit more time with your kids now that school's going back in. We're trying to be mindful of your time, and approaching the political season, we want to free you up to research everything we're talking about. We thank you for your appreciation of what we do. We thank you for your participation in what we do. But most of all, we thank you for having an ear that is critical, that holds us accountable, and we choose to represent you, we, the people. From the Grayson Network, tonight, I am your host, Danny Ellison, and from all of us here at the Roundtable, we bid you a good night.
Thank you.